catch it earlier, my name is Cori Haerr. So I've been with Integrated Ag about 2 years now. So it's pretty cool because I've been with this project from the beginning. Maybe. So this may be some repeat information to some of you, but I figured it'd be a good idea to refresh with our results from the study from 2023 as well as this previous crop season. Yep, we're good. So this study is in partnership with Ohio State, the Ohio Agribusiness Association, and the 4R Nutrient Stewardship Council. So the objective is mainly to check in on our tri-state potassium recommendations. So there's been kind of some concerns that those rates are not keeping up with the yield that we're pulling off. So this is just an opportunity for us to double check that and see if we need to adjust those levels. So in this study, we looked at emergence and as well as tissue samples and obviously yield too. Maybe. Yeah, next slide. That's right. There we go. So how would you rate the potassium levels on your farm? 5 being they're above the optimal range, there's plenty sufficient, and 1 being you really have some work to do there. So far, looking like everybody that we have responses from is right in that optimal range. So that's at least good. So this study, we had 2 treatments with 3 replications. So we had the first treatment was where we applied no potash. So those are those areas without any application. And then the second treatment was a 1-year potash recommendation on those stripes. And then in those areas that were in the sufficient range, we did apply 120 pounds of K2O on areas that we typically wouldn't for the sake of this study. And then just to give you an idea of this field, it was a pretty easy field to pick out just because it had a wide range of those CPUs and it also had a pretty nice break. So the high CPU area of the field was on that west side, the low CPU side was on the east side. So just to give us an idea and a baseline of where our soil test results were, before we applied any potash at the beginning of the study, we sampled this field at 3rd-acre grids in the spring of 2023. So it was at 140 ppm, so right in that optimal range, and all of those areas that we really looked at were within that optimal range as well. So right where we wanted to be from the start. We still had some areas that were in that sufficient range and some areas that were deficient, but overall in that optimal range. So just to kind of show you where we did apply potash, the black is where we did apply potash, and you can see it goes over pretty much every kind of range that we do have. So then we came back, and after that bean crop, we sampled in the fall of 2023, and our potassium levels did go up by 15% after that first year. I'm guessing this is probably because we applied potash in areas that didn't need it, especially around the edges. So that kind of throws it off a bit, and we are still hanging on in those optimal areas. So this is the same map, but I just split it out into the areas that we didn't apply potash and areas that we did. So overall, the areas that we didn't apply potash hung around in that 144 range. So no major changes from the first time we sampled there. And then the areas that we did apply potash up by about 12%. So overall, really still no major changes in those areas, but trending where we would think they would. And then after this previous year's corn crop, we came back and sampled again. And the average is still sticking around that 140 mark, but we can definitely see those highs are getting higher and those lows are getting lower. So once again, this is the same map, just split out between where potash was applied and where potash wasn't applied. So in the areas where there was no potash applied, we, of course, lost about 20% of that potassium level. And then we did lose just a smidgen on the potash applied areas. So there has been some concerns that a potash application can hurt emergence, especially in soybeans. So like we said last year, there really wasn't any major difference between those. So that rest assured, you don't have to worry about that. And we saw the same thing with corn, so no concerns there. I know those pictures can look a little misleading, but there wasn't any difference. So in the first year, we took tissue samples at V3 to V4 range, and then also R1 to R2 in the soybeans. So because we were so dry earlier on in 2023, we did see a difference in the no potash applied areas. So we were actually below the